You're listening to Advancing Our Church. Welcome to Advancing Our Church, a podcast about Catholic stewardship, leadership, and advancement. I'm Jim Friend, and with us today is Jacob Green. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jim. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, Jacob, you're one of our interns located up in the Albany office. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where do you go to school?
I go to school in SUNY Plattsburgh. I am a rising junior this upcoming semester and love Plattsburgh. It's a great school. And yeah, I just started interning here at CW about 4 weeks ago. And I really like everybody I'm working with. I've been having a great time here. I really enjoy it.
That's great. And what kind of tasks do they have a young intern doing up in CW up in Albany?
Initially, it was a lot of just like database entries. Like we would have some errors with just updates with all of the accounts with the fundraising through the church. I would have to go in updating addresses and names in any errors that were in there initially. But as I've continued working here, I've started to do more and more projects, working with the marketing team, and now here I am on the podcast. So, I'm really going up the ladder, it seems like.
You're rising quickly. Well, you know who else?
Yeah.
We've had a couple of great interns, more than a couple, I'm sure, over the years. I was talking with Yasmin Hicks the other week here on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Now she's a director with Changing Our World. And of course, our CEO started out as an intern at Changing Our World.
I did see that podcast with Yasmin. I watched that one the other day.
So tell us, Jacob, what drew you to Changing Our World? What kind of focus are you looking for your career?
Well, initially, I was at school, and my uncle actually is Jed Dorney. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, I know Jed, sure.
Yeah, he works in the Albany office, and he told me they were looking for interns, and he gave me Colleen's number, and I talked to Colleen a little bit when I was at school, and she was like, as soon as summer started, I came in and met her, and I met the team, and I just really loved everyone here. I felt like it was a great fit for me. And the work that I was doing, too, is I'm focused on marketing and digital media when I'm at school. So the work is, as well as people, everyone being really cool and nice, the work is what I'm studying, too. So I feel like it's a great fit for me.
That sounds like it. So, Jacob, you and I met in New York City a couple of weeks ago, and when we were there, I was able to record a few discussions with some of our very talented consultants. Yasmin actually was in one of the groups. This episode of Advancing Our Church is going to focus in on what nonprofits can do differently in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. So I have on the show today Vanessa Dickerson and Fred Roberts, and we're going to go ahead and go to that discussion now. But Jacob, thanks for being on the show. Wish you all the best in Albany, and we're very excited and happy to have you part of our podcast team.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and good luck with the rest of the podcast.
Thanks so much. Well, welcome to the podcast, guys. Great to have you with us here. I'm with Vanessa Dickerson and Fred Roberts from Changing Our World, and we're just going to have a little conversation about nonprofits and fundraising. We're moving into a new fiscal year, and the numbers, as of the date of this podcast, the numbers are down for individual giving and for giving to religious institutions. So it would make sense maybe to have some conversation about how that's going, maybe what development offices should be thinking about and planning for the new year. But before we do that, Vanessa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you've done here at CW?
All right. Good morning, Jim. Thank you for having me. I started at CW in 2013, so I'm going on 6 years. I started fundraising I was a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
And in Texas, we have something called Robin Hood, where the equal funding taxes. So if you're in a wealthy area, you have to give to, schools that aren't as well off. But that meant that we lost bus services and things for the band. And so we heavily fundraised so that we could keep our children active in their passions. Then when my youngest went to second grade, I decided to fundraise for a living and actually make some money doing it. I started with the Diocese of Dallas, working on their Our Faith, Our Future campaign, then worked in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, the Diocese of Camden, and now I'm in the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Kansas. So lots of fundraising,
so
yes.
A little bit of traveling around the country.
A little bit. Getting out there, yes.
Well, that's great. Fred, tell us a little bit about your career.
Sure. Last 8.5 years with Changing Our World, total of 22, doing fundraising consulting, primarily in the faith-based arena. So it's been my privilege to work with many different types of organizations, almost all nonprofit, and many Catholic dioceses, parishes, and schools. My home and office are in Cleveland, Ohio, but as most of us do, I've done a lot of traveling in my career across the country. So currently I'm working on a project in Hartford, Connecticut with the Hartford Bishops Foundation, and just glad to be here with you this morning.
Well, I'm so glad to have you both here. And, just a couple of days ago, as I said, the Giving USA came out with the numbers, and it was the first time that giving to religious institutions fell below 30%. And individual giving also fell significantly. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think the causes were? Obviously, we're seeing the effects, but what do you guys think?
Well, I would say, the landscape is always changing. In doing this 20 years, we have to be able to adapt. And recently, especially with the Catholic fundraising clients that we have, there's been numerous challenges, and that's obviously going to affect fundraising. But more and more, we see that our donors really want to know the impact of what their giving is. So it's incumbent on us as development professionals to be able to show that impact. And more, we have to do that with fewer resources. So the challenges become greater, but I think our knowledge becomes greater as well. I think with a lot of the development offices, they need to be leaner. They need to be lean and mean because of, if the dollars are shrinking, that means that they don't have the resources at their disposal in terms of staff and in terms of, the things that they need to do to get their message out. So it's really important to be open to new ideas, which can be difficult, especially when you have done, if you've done your fundraising a certain way for a number of years and it's been successful, you really don't want to or need to do anything differently. But in today's climate, I think it's really important to be open to new ideas, and so I think that
totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. And when I've done different workshops or coached different development professionals, I always, you got to try something new every year. You can't do that same annual fund year after year with the same practice and expect different results. It's the definition of insanity, right? Do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Try a major gift reception, try a different letter, try segmenting your letters, whatever it is, but just tried something different. How about you, Vanessa? What do you think?
Well, I think that there's so much out there to take advantage of now with social media and things like that, and trying to, as Fred said, change, adapt, and get involved in things, but growing that passion, keeping it new and not the same, as you were mentioning, the same appeal year after year. Yes, it's needed. Yes, it's there. But let's change it up a bit, because people are very savvy now. Not that they weren't back then, but with social media, you see things, you hear things, and also the climate has changed. And being in Catholic fundraising has been a challenge of late. And, it's just getting people back on board and getting that passion again, because the church itself has not changed. The faith is still there. It's getting people back involved in that.
Absolutely. And you talk about the changing climate. I mean, it is the elephant in the room. One of the ways in which, how can a fundraiser deal with the impact of some of the scandal that is out there in the media? Maybe some that are listening to this podcast are dealing with scandal in their own diocese, and they've been personally affected, maybe even in their own parish or their own religious institution in which they serve. I'll just throw out my thoughts on that, and then you guys can jump in with your own. But, I think now more than ever, that annual report, that financial report of giving, accountability, stewarding the dollars, talking about where the funds are being spent, making sure your donors are educated on the needs, as well as where you have spent the dollars in the last year, is probably more important now than it ever has been before. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree with that. The transparency is key. We've got to be up there. We've got to deal with it up front. And there is no hiding anymore. You can't sweep things under the rug like you could back in the day. It's just not worth it. So it's been as hard as it is to see things that have come out. It's good to see diocese and archdiocese being proactive in coming forward, whether it's for the right reasons or not. But as you said, let's address that elephant in the room, get it out there, deal with it, and overcome that so that we can move forward as a church completely without every year or two getting, just over the scandal here and then boom, here comes the scandal there. Let's all deal with it now and move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you, and would just say that accountability is the key. And when people are hurt and mad, they need a vehicle to be able to express that. So in my travels and my dealings with many different Catholic parishes, I think the leadership at the local level, the pastors that do get out in front of those emotions and will accept that and listen. I think listening is really key to everything that we do, but especially in this case where, as I said, when people are hurt, they want to be able to express that. And until you deal with that, we're not going to be able to move on from it. So I think the church is taking steps in that direction, but we obviously have a lot of work to do. And everything that happens out there in the world impacts us when we go to our donors and ask them for support for the next cause. So we need to be aware of that and be able to address it.
And it's not easy for you to go and see a donor who's got an issue or a bone to pick like that. And I know that a lot of the folks listening to the podcast who may be in diocesan development or school development have sat and listened to the repercussions of what may have happened in their own diocese or their own parish, or just what the donors are seeing nationally, what they see on the national stage, which is popping up in different dioceses around the country. Being that listening ear, can be a challenge, but it also can produce blessings. It can produce good things when you take the time and when a donor feels heard, and then you can take the opportunity to tell them how you are being accountable, how you are being transparent, the steps that your diocese or that your small nonprofit is taking to be proactive and make sure that they know what is happening with the funds that are being raised and how you're being transparent. So as we move into 1920, what should a small development shop think about? And I say small development shop, some folks that are listening may be a one-person or a two-person development shop, or a very small team. They may have limited resources. I like to say they may only have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but how are they going to multiply that, to feed the 5,000? What should be the priorities of a small development shop, in 1920 with limited resources? What are your thoughts?
I think it really comes down to the people. And, if you have a limited number of people, a small shop as you're describing, there's, in theory, there's a limited amount of work that you can get done. But I think that's where you need to expand your thinking and maybe look to areas like volunteerism. because so many folks that are supportive of you, of your causes, will get involved with different initiatives if they're approached in the right way. So a lot of times we look at our donors as somebody who can help us to fund a project or to fund a campaign, or in that light. But I think to think beyond our staff, for smaller foundations that have boards or leadership committees, to really rely on them to do more as the leadership body of the organization, to help in that regard. So I think we definitely need to be creative in our thinking. We can't just, like you say, you can't do the same thing and expect to get different results. So outside of the box thinking, I think, is really important.
What do you think, Vanessa?
I think it's communicating your case. Yes, definitely the people, but getting your case out there, getting it heard, getting people to grow with it, to feel passion for your case so that you can, bring the volunteers in, because we all have a passion for, what affects us. And so it may be something you never even thought of until it affects your life. And then you can get behind that and grow that case and educate the people around you so that you become a volunteer and a steward of that, whatever it is. So, between the people and the case and the passion, I think it all comes together.
What are you two seeing out in the nonprofit world, out in the different organizations that you're working with? Any new approaches that come to mind?
So, I follow a lot of nonprofits that are important to me on Twitter. So, again, back to the social media element, seeing the creativity with the hashtags and the personal stories and things that excuse me, that are important to me so that I can, follow that. And so the social media, I think, is just really grown, and obviously, and if you can take the positive of social media and follow it and create along with it, move with that, then I think you can really be successful. And I've seen a lot of the nonprofits that I follow really take advantage of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all of that good stuff that we never had.
Sure.
10 years ago was direct mail.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You definitely need to know your audience. So if your audience is of a younger, the millennials, then I think social media has definitely got to be part of your strategy. With our focus with working with Catholic organizations, many of our folks, our audience is, has more gray hair, so to speak. So we need to have different strategies, but I think I always like to keep things simple, Jim, and I think the relationship is so important. So to develop those relationships, and not to rely strictly on direct mail, but maybe to try some different ways of outreach that maybe aren't social media, but to utilize technology to help to develop those relationships. But I don't think anything really replaces that face-to-face contact. So that's always been what we have strived for. Is to develop those interpersonal relationships and to build on those in various ways. There are different ways to reach folks in those events and the fun types of things that resonate with your target audience are always important as well.
And sometimes summertime, which we're in now, can be an opportunity to kind of do a little self-check. All right. Where's my board at with philanthropy? Where's my staff giving at with philanthropy? And maybe, as we said at the beginning, trying something new in that regard. Or do I have an active development committee, on the board? And do I have 100% giving from all of my board members? How are my board members solicited? Who solicits them? Are they all at the right levels? Do we think that maybe they could do a little more for the organization? Do I just accept one-time gifts for my annual fund, or am I trying to get reoccurring gifts? What's my success rate on that, and transferring those to monthly gifts? Or have I thought about doing a pledge to my annual fund versus just getting a one-time gift? Spread those payments out over 6 months or 10 months, and what kind of push goes into that? So I think there's a lot of best practices out there where organizations can, just do a little bit of self-inventory and say, where am I at? And it was, as we look at, the fact that not only religion is down, but individual giving is down, and the implications of the tax laws that were enacted. Now we're feeling that, here we are. Everybody wondered, well, what would the effects be? Here we are. We're down. What are your thoughts on that? So if the tax advantages aren't there for the average family, how can we encourage families who may not have the tax benefit of giving to an organization? How do we inspire them to make a gift?
To me, with the implication of the taxes are taking away, online giving I think is a great way in that it. So when you're doing fundraising and you're making an ask, if you break it out and take away the sticker shock of it, I'm going to ask you, Jim, for $10,000 a year over the next 5 years for a total gift of $50,000, takes away the pain of going, Jim, can you give me $50,000? So to do online giving where it's broken out over, monthly payments is no different than your car payment or anything like that. So to me, that's a great way of getting that out there and taking away the sticker shock, because you no longer, if you're not giving over $12,000, you're not going to get that tax break anymore. So
yeah, true.
It's tough if the one of the prime motivations for giving is the tax advantage of that charitable gift. Then you got a much tougher challenge than you did before. What I've seen, Jim, in faith-based fundraising is that the motivation is much different. So
sure.
I think we really need to focus on what is the good that's being done with your gift, and what is the impact. And those are certainly incentives, those types of things, the tax advantages, memorial opportunities for major gifts to be able to put your name. Families that want to put their name somewhere. That certainly is an incentive, but shouldn't be the central focus of what it is that we're asking for.
Sure, absolutely. And there's still other tax advantages like the IRA benefit for those who are of the age. But what I'm thinking about parishes now. My own parish, for example, did an increased offertory. We did a stewardship campaign in the fall, and we're up just a little bit, but not where we were hoping to be. I hope my pastor doesn't mind me saying that on the podcast. But there may be other parishes that did an increased offertory program, and they're looking at their results, thinking, "Geez, I thought it was going to be more than it is now," or maybe they projected it would be more. Maybe in the past, if they had done it 5 years ago, it would have been more. But they're not seeing quite the results. I think now is really a critical time for, even at the parish level, communications of where those funds are being spent on an annual basis. And summertime, as we end the fiscal year, is a good time to do that. To put that kind of report together and think about producing something in the fall. A lot of parishes do increased offertory programs or annual giving programs that kick off in September, October, before their bishop's annual appeal begins. And that really is a great time. I had a pastor say to me recently, if you're going to do a campaign, do it in the fall, because everybody feels good in the fall. It's just a good time. There's a sense of being refreshed, of newness, about that September month, coming back to school. Like, there's lots of new possibilities. It is a good time to ask. By the time you get to April, May, June, it's just people are tired. They're ready for a break. But so now is a good time to start thinking about that.
I think communication is really key to be able to reach your audience, with your message, so that and also patience, to be patient. So it takes a while sometimes to build up a program like an annual appeal. So. And then once you do get it up and running, then you have some other challenges. But, if you didn't do quite as well this year as you hoped, really take stock of what it was that resonated with the folks, and be honest, and what are some of the things that they had concerns about, and to be able to address that next year. So I think to be positive and encouraging to our donors is really important, and not to get discouraged if it doesn't work immediately. If you communicate properly and have the right message, then you'll be successful.
And I'm going to add on to that. An annual report is great. It's mailed. It's maybe put in the bulletin. But speaking about it, and what I think or say as layman's terms, a lot of times we go to Mass on Sundays, and it's a building we go to pray and take the communion, and we leave, and we don't sometimes realize that the lights there, that's money that has to be paid, and the staff that takes care of this, that, and the other. And to communicate that as not as a business, but really, just like you have an electricity bill, we have an electricity bill. Just like, you send your kids to VBS, we have to staff that. And so things like that, putting it so that people understand it more so than I go here for an hour every week to, that kind of communication, I think, is key from the pulpit.
I think also just in this, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think in this climate, sometimes the natural tendency is, this is just the wrong time to ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the wrong time to get up there and make an appeal. But we've got to kind of go against maybe our base instincts there and be brave, and put it out there, and remember that we are not asking for ourselves. We're asking for the betterment of the communities that we serve. I always have such tremendous respect for pastors and for nonprofit leaders that are out there and being bold and making the ask, because they're not doing it for themselves. Pastor may only be at his parish for 6 years, and then he moves on. So if he has the vision and the foresight to do a major capital campaign while he's at that parish, well, he's certainly coming out of his own comfort zone to do that. So, right. Props to him for coming out of his comfort zone to do what's best for his community, because he's not personally going to benefit that, in the future for his own lifetime. He may be at the next community. And the same for any, high school president or principal who may be listening, that, making that ask is you're helping your successors down the road. And certainly they have benefited. We have all benefited from those who came before us, the generations who raised money and, built the institutions that we now serve. And now it's our time.
It is. It's all how you look at it too, because we always say, for those that are reluctant to do fundraising, which is just about everybody, at least at first, to say the worst thing that can happen is that they'll say no.
Right.
So, and you've at least made that contact, and you've got that experience, and can take that and as a learning experience for the next one. So, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So. Yep. Getting out there and asking is going to do good. And, in the case of faith-based fundraising, we're doing this for a higher cause, like you were saying.
Yep.
I always love that saying. It's just not a good time to raise money for my parish right now. And I always say, no time is a good time to raise money, and every day is a good day to raise money. So
I like that. Yeah. And for some of the organizations that we serve, they serve Catholics and they serve non-Catholics alike. Mm-hmm. And we've used this on other episodes of the podcast, but it's so true that we raise money for folks because we are Catholic, right? We fund these missions because we're Catholic, not necessarily because all the people that we serve are Catholic. And I think that that's true around evangelization. It's true around social service ministry, and there has never been a more important time for us to preserve and to work harder for this mission than today. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
I do want to, and I don't know if I can do this, you can edit it out, give a shout out to my pastor in Olathe, building a church, brand new, nothing, celebrating Mass in the local elementary school.
That's great.
And 753 families, and he intends to have a face-to-face, not he himself, but he and his committee intend to have face-to-face visits with all families. And I'm like, that's where That's where your time should be, the face-to-face visit.
That's excellent. We're definitely not editing that out.
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Well, I didn't know if I could drop that Olathe, Kansas.
Sure.
I want JP2,
Little
St.
shout
John
out.
Paul II,
Yay.
Parish in Olathe, Kansas.
All
Father
right.
Andrew Strobel.
Well, just thanks for having me on the podcast this morning. This has been my first experience with any kind of a podcast. So I've listened to a few, but wasn't really sure what to expect. And you've done a great job of making this painless. So I certainly appreciate that. And was just thinking, is there theme music involved with your podcast, Jim?
There is. There's a little. We do have a little theme that we found. Yeah. Why do you play the music? Or
No. I just I was listening to iTunes earlier this week, and some classic rock. Eric Clapton has a song called "Hello, Old Friend." So I thought that would be an appropriate.
That's a good one.
Lead in for your podcast, but
we'll see if we can get the rights to that. I like that.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So, thanks again.
Absolutely. Well, part of our show is to feature some of the great talented people that we have on the staff at CW. Obviously, I'm sitting with two of them, and I really appreciate all your thoughts and insights. And I'm sure that someone who's listening to this podcast will get some new thoughts and maybe even a little inspiration, I think is what we were hoping for today, to know that you're not in this alone, that there's a lot of us thinking about the same challenges, and that, by pulling our ideas as a community, we can tackle these challenges and be very successful. So thank you both for being on the show today.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
I want to thank Vanessa Dickerson, Fred Roberts, and of course Jacob Green for being on our show this week. It was a very good conversation, and if any of you who are listening had additional questions or want to follow up about any of the topics that we talked about on today's show, please shoot me an email at jim@advancingourchurch.com. Advancing Our Church is a production of Changing Our World, a fundraising and social impact consulting firm that has been advising both nonprofits and corporations for the past 20 years. For more information, please visit us at changingourworld.com. If you'd like more information about our show, please visit our website at advancingourchurch.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Well, that's it for me. I hope you're all having a wonderful summer. Have a great week, everybody. Take care, and God bless.